My name is Eliza Merritt, and the people who raised me tried to burn down my house, just because I refused to live the life they chose for me. I had poured everything, every dollar, every heartbeat, into opening a tiny animal clinic in Asheville, and for that, my own parents showed up with gasoline in the middle of the night, and what happened next changed my life forever. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know who's out there listening to my story. The orchard smelled like sun-warmed peaches and charcoal. If you squinted past the gingham tablecloths and plastic chairs, you might think it was a perfect summer gathering. Kids zipped between apple trees, chasing bubbles. My aunt brought her famous potato salad, but I stood stiffly on the edge of the lawn, pretending not to notice the glances, or the laughter that always came just a beat too late. I was holding Baxter, a rescued beagle pup with a crooked tail and the softest ears you've ever touched. He had this instinct to melt against me like he knew I was safe. Or maybe I needed him more than he needed me. Either way, he was a comfort in a sea of quiet disapproval. Then came the voice. "Still playing doctor for dogs, huh? Uncle Ruddy," my mom's older brother, ex-Marine, insurance agent, believer in meat, whiskey, and men's voices being louder than women's ambition. He laughed before the sentence even finished, as if the punchline had already landed. A few chuckles rippled around the folding table. The worst part, my mom didn't correct him. She didn't even look at me, just stirred her sweet tea, eyes on the horizon like she hadn't heard a thing. But I saw her jaw tighten. I smiled tight, too, and knelt to adjust Baxter's leash. "Actually, I'm in my 3rd year of veterinary medicine," I said evenly, "specializing in rural animal care." "You hear that?" Ruddy called out to the rest of the family. "Little Miss Animal Rights is gonna save the barn cats and goat herds of America." More laughter. And just like that, the orchard's warmth turned cold. I could feel the sweat on my back, not from the sun, but from the heat of embarrassment. Baxter whined softly. I wished I could vanish into the grass. "You know," my cousin Dana piped up, "my friend just finished her nursing degree. Full-time job, benefits, real practical." Another one, always another. Every degree that wasn't mine. Every real job that didn't require gloves and a scalpel and a lifetime of debt. "I'm proud of what I do," I said, more to myself than anyone else. Uncle Ruddy leaned back in his chair, belly full of brisket and superiority. "Tell you what, Eliza, if you ever want a real career, we've got a temp spot open at the agency. We even let girls answer the phones now." That got the biggest laugh of all. And then silence. My dad cleared his throat. "You kids want pie," he offered, like a clumsy referee calling for a timeout. But the damage was done. The invisible wall had dropped, and I was on the wrong side. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I stayed exactly where I was, letting the sun hit my face and Baxter's heartbeat sync with mine. But inside, I was cracking. Because I hadn't come to that picnic to defend my choices. I'd come hoping, stupidly, for validation. The kind only family can give, or withhold. Later, when the sky turned purple and the lanterns flickered on, I helped clean up. My mom handed me a tray of forks without meeting my eyes. "You know we just worry," she murmured. "About what?" I asked. "That I'll succeed." She didn't answer. That night, back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel like it could anchor me. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, sunburned, exhausted, and full of 1,000 unsaid things. This wasn't the first time they'd laughed at me, but something had shifted. The laughter had teeth now, and I was done bleeding for it. My dorm room wasn't much, just a twin bed, a desk, and one stubborn radiator that hissed like it had a grudge. But after the orchard, it felt like sanctuary. Like stepping into a place where no one measured your worth by how fast you got married or how many insurance policies you sold. I dropped my keys into the ceramic dish by the door, the one my roommate Lydia had made in a pottery class and insisted was an abstract bullfrog. It looked more like a collapsed donut, but I never said that out loud. Not when Lydia had been my anchor through anatomy exams and sobbing phone calls home. She was sprawled on the bed with flashcards and a highlighter between her toes. "So," she said without looking up, "was the family picnic everything you dreamed of and more?" I let out a breath that carried the whole afternoon with it. "They laughed when I mentioned vet school. Again." "Oof," she winced. "Did Reddy pull out the Dogs Don't Pay Bills classic or the Should Have Been a Dental Hygienist remix?" I gave her a look. "Oh, both, a double feature." She tossed me a mini Snickers from her stash drawer. "Eat this, it has peanuts. Protein heals emotional trauma. I sank onto the floor beside her bed and unwrapped it slowly, letting the sugar melt on my tongue like something sacred. It's like they think ambition is a disease, and I caught it. Lydia rolled onto her stomach, her expression softening. Or maybe you just remind them of the things they were too afraid to want. That hit me somewhere tender. A quiet knock on the door broke the moment. When I opened it, two classmates, Lewis and Hallie, stood there holding a neon pink poster. "Guess who aced the midterm?" Lewis beamed. "You nerd, top marks," I blinked. "Wait, what?" Hallie waved the printout in front of me. "Professor Dana posted the scores. You didn't just ace it, you smoked it, like surgical precision." No one else even came close. I stared at the sheet. There it was. Eliza Merritt 98.7% for a second. I just stood there, holding onto that paper like it was proof I wasn't delusional. That maybe my dream wasn't just a punchline waiting to happen. "We're getting coffee to celebrate," Hallie said. "You in?" I hesitated. The sadness hadn't left me yet. It clung to my ribs like damp clothes. But Lydia nudged me with her foot. "Go. The flashcards will still be here when you get back." Outside, the campus had that soft, pre-exam week glow. Students walked in clusters, the sky dipped in gold, and someone was playing a cello on the library steps. I tucked the poster into my bag and let myself smile. At the cafe, we squeezed into a booth that smelled like cinnamon and overachievers. My classmates talked shop, about internships, volunteer clinics, the latest vet tech breakthroughs, and for once I wasn't the outsider at the table. I belonged. Lewis leaned over and nudged me. "You ever think about specializing in surgery? You've got that focus. It's kind of scary." I laughed, and it came out lighter than expected. "I've thought about it." In that moment, I felt it, not just ambition, but clarity, like something inside me had clicked back into place. My family didn't get it, but these people did. They saw what I saw when I looked at a wounded animal or a scan filled with troubling signs: possibility, precision, the chance to do something that mattered. Later that night, back in the dorm, I pulled out the picnic photo someone had snapped me standing with Baxter just before the jokes started. I looked peaceful, hopeful even. I slid the photo behind my desk lamp, not to forget, but to remember what I was up against. And what I was working for: recognition, dignity, a future they'd never be able to laugh away. There's a kind of silence that follows praise, the good kind, the kind that fills you up. But there's another kind, too. The silence that comes after you share something meaningful and it echoes back hollow. That second kind, that's the one I heard when I checked my phone after class. The day had started on a high. It was the tail end of Professor Maxwell's lecture on comparative cardiovascular anatomy, our third-year cohort buzzing with caffeine and burnout. The kind of class where even blinking too slowly could make you fall behind. Professor Maxwell wasn't the warm and fuzzy type. He wore steel-rimmed glasses and favored unannounced quizzes like they were life lessons. But he knew his stuff, and I respected him more than I ever let on. Halfway through a slide on feline arterial anomalies, he paused, squinting toward the back of the room. "Eliza," he said, catching me mid-sip of coffee, "would you mind sharing your findings on the coronary shunt case from last week?" I froze. Not because I wasn't prepared. I'd spent hours combing through vet journals and cross-species case studies. But because when someone like Professor Maxwell says your name in front of 100 students, your brain forgets how sentences work. I stood slowly, heart pounding. "Sure." And then the words came, not rushed or rambling, but steady, focused, like flipping through pages I'd already memorized. He listened without interrupting, then gave a small nod. "That," he said, "is academic leadership. Surgical instincts paired with scientific curiosity. If this were a residency interview, you'd be invited back before you left the room." The class went still. Someone let out a low whistle. My cheeks burned, but I couldn't stop the grin forming on my face. It was the kind of praise I used to dream about. The kind you write in journals just to reread later when doubt creeps in. After class, Hallie snapped a photo of me with Professor Maxwell. He even smiled a little, which I'm pretty sure was a historic event. "You're a machine," she whispered. "In a good way." I laughed. "Can I be a compassionate machine?" "Absolutely, like a Roomba that rescues kittens." Back in the campus cafe, I ordered a chai latte and opened my messages. The photo, the quote from Professor Maxwell, the write-up from the lecture, I compiled it all and sent it in a group chat labeled family. Got called an academic leader today by one of the toughest profs in the program. Felt like a big deal, just wanted to share. I hit send and waited. 5 minutes, 10. The message marked read. No reply. I refreshed my feed, checked my email, skimmed an article about a rural vet clinic in Montana. Anything to distract myself from the tiny blinking cursor on my screen. Finally, ping. My dad's response, a single thumbs up emoji, that was it. Not proud of you. Not wow, that's amazing. Just a thumb, cold, cartoonish approval. My heart sank. I stared at it for a long time as if it might sprout more words if I waited long enough. It didn't. Somewhere across the quad, music floated through the air, and a cappella group rehearsing, someone clapping out a rhythm. The world kept moving, but I sat in that cafe, surrounded by strangers, feeling strangely invisible. I hadn't wanted a parade, just a real response. Something to tell me I wasn't doing this all alone. The chai latte cooled in my hands. Later, I walked back to my dorm under street lamps that blinked too slowly, casting everything in half shadow. I passed the bulletin board in the bio building, flyers for internships, photos from fieldwork trips, scribbled notes about summer grants. I added my own flyer. Third-year vet student offering free tutoring in physiology and anatomy, strong academic standing, passionate about animal health. I pinned it beneath a flyer for a lost cat and smiled to myself. If they couldn't see me yet, that was fine. I wasn't invisible. I was just focused. And no emoji could take that away from me. There's a particular kind of stillness right before you speak in public. It's not fear exactly. More like standing at the edge of something steep, heart pounding, knees unsure, but knowing the leap is worth it. That's what the semester showcase felt like. I stood in a narrow corridor outside the lecture hall, clutching my cue cards and trying not to sweat through my blazer. Around me, students buzzed, rehearsing, reapplying lip gloss, adjusting display boards on collapsible tables. Everyone dressed a little sharper than usual. Hope had a dress code, apparently. My project was called Bridging the Gap, Rural Animal Health Systems in Underserved Counties. Not the flashiest title, but it was mine. Hours of research, interviews with mobile vets, case studies on livestock management in Appalachia, and a few teary nights arguing with a printer that kept jamming. I'd poured everything into it because I knew what it meant. Animals in those areas didn't get care. Not because they didn't matter, but because people forgot they existed. And I hadn't forgotten. The moment arrived faster than I expected. My name was called, the room quieted, and I walked toward the podium with every cell in my body screaming. Don't trip. Don't blank. Just breathe. I breathed. And I spoke. Not robotically, not over-rehearsed, but with something that felt dangerously close to conviction. I talked about the economic barriers to veterinary access, the stories of farmers who lost entire herds to preventable diseases, the quiet tragedy of neglected pets in towns with no vet for miles. I outlined solutions, proposed networks, showed maps, data, photos. The room was still. And then came applause. But that wasn't the moment that changed my life. That came after. As I packed up my materials, a woman approached, mid-40s, sharp navy blazer, boots too expensive for a university hallway. Her name tag read Dr. Sasha Greer, class of 1. I liked your fire, she said, offering a business card. You didn't just present a problem, you fought for it. I blinked. Thank you, I mean, wow, that means a lot. I run a mobile clinic system across 6 rural counties, she added. Been looking for someone with your kind of lens. Someone who doesn't see underfunded areas as lost causes. I was still gripping the edge of my table. I'd like to mentor you, she continued. If you're interested, it wouldn't be just symbolic. I'm talking real shadowing hours, field work, maybe even a research grant if things align. I wanted to say something cool, polished, but all I managed was, seriously, she smiled. Dead serious, think about it. Email me by Monday. Then she walked away just like that, leaving a silence in her wake I wasn't used to, the kind filled with sudden possibility. Lydia found me in the hallway moments later. What happened? She whispered, eyes wide. You look like you just saw a ghost. I held out the card like it was made of gold. I think I just met my future. Back at the dorm that night, I didn't even change out of my presentation clothes. I just laid on my bed, staring at the ceiling, reliving every second. Her voice, her offer, the casual certainty with which she said, you didn't just present, you fought. Because I had fought. Not just for those animals or those forgotten counties, but for myself, for the version of Eliza Merritt that no one back home seemed to recognize. The one who didn't need to sell insurance or marry well to matter. I didn't text my parents. Not this time. Not because I was angry, but because this win didn't belong to them. It belonged to the girl who had stood in an orchard clutching a rescue puppy while her uncle laughed at her dreams. And that girl, she was just getting started. I posted the news on a Thursday morning just before my lab. A simple picture, me standing beside Dr. Sasha Greer, beaming in that lecture hall hallway, and the caption, "Honored to begin mentorship with Dr. Greer and explore real-world applications for rural vet care. Here, S to fighting for the forgotten corners." No filters. No hashtags, just truth. By the time I finished my physiology class, the post had over 200 likes. Mostly classmates, professors, even some texts from the local shelter. Hallie left a string of fire emojis. Lewis wrote, "When you get famous, don't forget us humble caffeine addicts." It was the first time I'd felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't climbing this mountain alone. That little hum of encouragement carried me through midterms, grant application drafts, and even the paperwork Dr. Greer emailed with the subject line, "Welcome to the big league." I printed it out and pinned it next to the flyer for lost cats. But then came Thanksgiving, and I should have known better. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home with a pie on my lap and a knot in my stomach. The trees were bare. The porch light buzzed. I told myself things might be different now. Maybe the mentorship post had softened them. I walked in to find the house warm and full of familiar smells, stuffing, cinnamon, too much perfume. My cousin Garrett was already holding court in the living room, balancing a glass of wine and a smirk. "You see what Garrett has been up to," Aunt Lorraine said, not 5 minutes in. "Top seller at his insurance firm 3 months running. Bought a boat. Didn't even tell us." The room erupted into congratulatory noise. I smiled politely, balancing the pie in my arms. "That's amazing," I said. "Congrats, Garrett," he winked. "And you still fixing up strays." There it was, the inevitable jab. I opened my mouth ready to mention Dr. Greer, the grant work, the mentorship, but my mother's voice cut through first. "You could have had a normal job by now," she said, setting down a bowl of green beans. The words were soft, sigh-shaped, but they hit like a slap. The room quieted, not in shock, just in shared discomfort. The kind of silence people reserve for remarks they agree with but don't want to say aloud. I stared at the untouched cranberry sauce on my plate, bright red, almost glowing. Like it knew it didn't belong, I forced a smile. "Vet medicine is a job, Mom, a real one." She didn't look up. "You know what I mean." No one else jumped in. No one said, "She's doing great," or "That mentorship is a huge deal." They just passed roles and shifted in their chairs. Later, after the pumpkin pie and the parade of humblebrags and the clinking of wine glasses, I slipped out onto the back porch. The air was cold and crisp, biting at the edges of my sleeves. I pulled out my phone and opened the mentorship email again. Read the first line. "Eliza, your presentation revealed not only skill but heart. That combination is rare and needed." I pressed the screen to my chest, as if that line could warm me better than any family toast ever could. Behind me, laughter rose, muffled, far away. They were moving on, telling stories, refilling drinks. And I was still outside, holding on to a version of success no one in that house seemed to recognize. But I recognized it. I wasn't a phase, or a detour, or someone playing doctor for dogs. I was a future vet, and I had someone finally willing to guide me like I was worth mentoring. Still, as I sat there staring into the dark trees, I couldn't help but wonder, if I built a life full of purpose and no one in my family could see it, did it still count? I drove to Asheville with everything I owned packed into a borrowed pickup truck: books, bedding, one stubborn desk lamp, and a tin box filled with old vet textbooks and sharper memories. The highway stretched out like a sigh, and for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. Graduation hadn't been a parade. I wore the gown, walked the stage, smiled for pictures I never sent home. But the pride I carried, that was private, sacred, like a stone I'd polished in secret. Asheville welcomed me with open skies, red clay roads, and a kind of quiet I didn't know I needed. I'd found it through a friend of a friend on an animal welfare forum, an online collective of vet students, techs, and shelter staff who called themselves the Fixers. They answered questions about mobile units, rural permits, and where to find gently used surgical tables like it was nothing. When I posted that I was looking to start a low-cost clinic, someone named Maribel replied within hours. "Come to Asheville," she wrote. "We've got a place, not fancy, but it breathes." She was right. The building was a converted tool shed behind an old florist's shop on the edge of town. Tiny, with cracked windows and ivy creeping up one wall like gossip. When I stepped inside, something clicked. The air smelled like dust and dried herbs, the floor groaned, and still I could see it, not just a clinic, a beginning. Maribel and I met that first week. She ran a local rescue, all tattoos and oversized earrings, and had a laugh that could shatter glass. "You remind me of me," she said, handing me a coffee. "Except I never had the guts for grad school, so you're already winning." I told her about the mentorship, the long nights, the cold family dinners. She didn't flinch. "We build new circles," she said. "That's what women like us do." And so we built. The online collective donated equipment, exam tables, a used autoclave, a dozen leashes and boxes of expired but still good bandages. A retired vet from Oregon mailed me a stethoscope with a note that read, "For someone who'll actually use it with heart." We cleaned, painted, patched. Every night I went home with splinters in my hands and drywall dust in my lungs, and I'd never felt more alive. Opening day was quiet. Just a few neighbors, some wagging tails, a local baker who brought gluten-free dog biscuits wrapped in wax paper. I stood under the homemade banner, "Merit Vet Care," healing with honor, and cut the ribbon with a pair of borrowed scissors. No news crews, no parents, just sunlight, applause, and the sound of someone's golden retriever barking at balloons. Inside, the walls still smelled faintly of paint. My name was on the license taped near the door, and for the first time in my life, it felt like I belonged somewhere that fit. That night, I sat on the clinic's front steps as the sun dipped below the trees. A breeze rustled the grass. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes played a lazy tune. I thought about everything it took to get here, the laughter I'd swallowed, the silence I'd endured, the dreams they tried to reshape into something safer. And I thought about the people who had shown up for me without obligation. People who didn't share my blood but believed in my pulse, who heard my voice and didn't try to change its tone. Sometimes family isn't who raised you, it's who helps you rise. It started with a dog named Charlie. A retired rancher brought him in one rainy morning, apologizing every other word. "He ain't been right since the storm," he muttered, stroking the old mutt's patchy fur. "Can't eat, won't bark." I thought it was just old age, but then he started limping. Charlie was 11, arthritic, underweight, and trembling like a leaf in a thunderclap. I sat on the floor instead of behind the table, let him sniff my hands, waited until his breathing evened out before touching his paws. The rancher watched with wide eyes. "You talk to animals or something," I smiled. "Just listen a little longer than most." Turned out Charlie had a dislocated toe and a cracked tooth. We wrapped him up, fed him soft rice, and I sent him home with meds and a gentle voice. 3 days later, I had 7 new clients. Charlie's story spread faster than I ever imagined. The rancher told a neighbor, who told his church friend, who told the guy who managed the co-op. By the end of the week, my phone was ringing before sunrise, people calling to ask if I had time for their goat, their terrier, their grumpy cat who hadn't purred in months. It wasn't just the animals they brought, it was stories. A woman who cried over her parrot who'd been her only companion since her divorce. A little boy with a one-eyed hamster and a father who called me Doc like it was holy. An elderly man who just wanted me to confirm his barn cat was in fact pregnant and not just fat and dramatic. They trusted me, with their animals, with their memories, and in return I gave them time. No one was rushed. No one felt stupid. We sat together on benches outside when the weather was nice. I kept hot tea in the waiting area and offered it in mismatched mugs from yard sales. The clinic smelled like lavender spray and dog biscuits, and people started calling it cozy. One morning, I opened the door to find a box of fresh scones and a note that read, "For the lady who helped Daisy walk again." Redbud Bakery. A week later, the bakery's owner showed up with her schnauzer. "Any vet who kisses a goat on the forehead deserves cinnamon rolls on Tuesdays," she said, handing me a paper bag. The rolls were warm, so was my chest. I hung up every thank you card that came in, taped them to the wall near the desk. Over time, the paint disappeared behind drawings, Polaroids, and scribbled notes from kids. Lydia visited one weekend. She stood in the middle of the clinic with her mouth open, spinning slowly. "This feels like walking into a hug," she whispered. "That's the goal," I told her. The assistant I hired, Avery, was 22, sharp-eyed and full of ideas. She designed a logo with a blue stethoscope wrapped around a paw print and our tagline, "Healing with Honor." Ray, my marketing-savvy friend from vet school, helped build a website. We took photos in the garden behind the clinic, holding rescue puppies and smiling like people who believed in tomorrow. We laughed a lot, sometimes through our hands, sometimes through tears. But the laughter always came back. At the end of each day, I'd sit on the front steps with a notebook, not to chart appointments, but to remember feelings. To record things like patient, elderly tabby named Ghost, diagnosis, arthritis. Owner called me a miracle whisperer, I cried after they left. Because these moments, they mattered. They were proof that I hadn't been foolish to want this. That the jokes, the silence, the cold dinners hadn't broken me. They'd tempered me. Each animal, each client, each cup of tea in a chipped mug, they were bricks in the foundation I'd built myself. Not for recognition, not even for revenge, but because healing, it turned out, was contagious. And it had finally found me, too. The vet conference was in Atlanta, 2 days of panels, networking mixers, and more scientific jargon than even I could digest. But when Dr. Greer offered to sponsor my registration, I said yes before the sentence finished. I didn't even check the calendar. Not until the hotel email came through. Conference dates, July 7-9. My stomach dipped. The annual family picnic. Always the second weekend in July. Always in that orchard with the checkered tablecloths and too many folding chairs. Where last year I stood beside a rescued beagle and swallowed a laugh that wasn't mine. I stared at the calendar for a long time. Let the red circle around the 8th blur. Then I clicked confirm on the hotel room and packed my bags. The conference was electric. Veterinarians from all over the country filled hotel ballrooms and clutched coffee like lifelines. I shook hands with researchers I'd quoted in undergrad. Watched a live demonstration on small animal trauma response that left me breathless. Even spoke on a panel about rural outreach. Someone approached me afterward and said, "You speak like you've seen what you're fixing." I had, and I didn't hide it. That night I collapsed in my hotel bed with sore feet and a heart so full it ached. I pulled up my camera roll, snapped selfies with new colleagues, blurry shots of slides I wanted to remember, a photo of my conference badge with the ribbon, mentor spotlight speaker. It felt like proof of growth, of the life I'd chosen. Then my phone buzzed. Missed call, Mom. I hesitated. Another buzz, new voicemail. I played it. "Hi, Eliza." Her voice was clipped. "We heard you're not coming. Too good for your roots now, I guess. We set a plate for you anyway, but well, we heard about your clinic. Sounds like it's just a pet spa for yuppies. Hope you're enjoying the fancy city." Click. No goodbye, no warmth, just static. The words didn't land all at once. They trickled in slowly like cold water under a door. Too good for your roots. A pet spa. Fancy city. I sat perfectly still in that hotel room, surrounded by my hard-earned pride and the echo of their disappointment. And I hated how fast the old ache returned. The sharp one. The kind that whispered they'll never see you no matter how brightly you shine. I turned off the phone, laid back on the pillows, watched the ceiling fade into darkness. I had spent so long building this version of myself, strong, steady, purpose-driven. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd catch up. That this time they'd call to say, "We're proud of you." Instead, they found new ways to insult what they didn't understand. And still, why did I care so much? I wanted to scream, "This isn't a pet spa. It's a lifeline. A place where people cry over their dogs and trust me with their grief. Where I hold a rabbit while a child says goodbye. Where farmers bring calves wrapped in blankets and call me a blessing." But I didn't scream. I just lay there. The phone screen pulsed once more, this time with a photo from Marable back in Asheville. A snapshot of the clinic porch, sunlight slanting across the door. A line of clients waiting, dogs on leashes, someone holding a cat in a baby's sling. She decaptioned it. "Don't worry, we held it down while you became famous." I smiled, tears burning behind my eyes because they got it, they saw it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. After the voicemail, I gave myself one night to cry. Then I opened the clinic doors the next morning, rolled up my sleeves, and went right back to work. Grief and resentment weren't going to feed the stray kittens someone left on the porch. They weren't going to restock syringes or clean rabbit cages or fix the janky sink pipe Avery had named Gerald because it groaned like an old man with arthritis. Business didn't slow. If anything, it surged. Marable said it was the word-of-mouth snowball. Once the town trusted you, they trusted you loudly. And now people came in saying things like, "You helped my neighbor's cousin's beagle," or, "My hairdresser said you cried when her guinea pig died, and I knew I had to come here." I hired Avery full-time. She was smart, organized, and could wrangle a rooster without breaking a sweat. More importantly, she made me laugh on days when my jaw still ached from smiling politely at passive-aggressive phone calls. Together, we created a rhythm. Morning coffee while we reviewed appointments. Afternoon emergency walk-ins that threw the whole plan off course. Evenings spent labeling files, humming to music, or watching training videos with a bowl of popcorn between us. Then Ray showed up. "Marketing needs love," he said, walking in with his laptop and 3 mood boards. "Your website's decent, but your brand, baby, we're gonna make it sing." He wasn't kidding. Within a week, we had a new logo, a soft blue paw print wrapped in a stethoscope, and a color palette inspired by lavender fields and old barn wood. It looked like us. We picked new fonts, designed flyers, scheduled a photo shoot with the rescue animals. Avery wore a sunflower print dress and posed with a kitten named Spaghetti. I stood in front of the clinic holding a leash in one hand and a cup of tea in the other, laughing mid-shot. Ray grinned. This is gold." We stayed late that week, huddled around the computer with takeout containers and wine from Marable's celebration stash. We debated captions, swapped stories, and forgot the weight we'd all carried into adulthood. "You know what this clinic is," Ray said, swirling his wine. "It's proof. That kindness isn't weakness. That gentle doesn't mean small." I didn't respond right away, just reached out, rested my hand on the desk, felt the grain of the wood we'd sanded ourselves, the paint I'd chosen, the history we were still writing. The next morning, I found a note on my desk in Avery's looping handwriting. "Don't forget, your dream lives here now, and it's thriving." She was right. I saw it in every new client who called me doc with unfiltered affection, in every animal who walked out the door a little less scared than they came in, in the chalkboard wall in our lobby where people left messages like, "You saved Luna's life. Thank you." There were still moments, quiet ones, when I wondered if my parents were proud, if they saw the logo on my website, if they heard about the conference, if they still pictured me as a little girl with scabbed knees and big dreams, or if they'd replaced her with a stranger they didn't want to understand. But those thoughts came and went like weather, and the storm inside me, it was finally starting to pass. I bought the farmhouse on instinct. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, 1 stubborn chimney, and floorboards that creaked like old gossip, but the porch wrapped around the front like an embrace, and the backyard sloped gently into wild grass and sky. When I stepped inside the first time, the air smelled like old cedar and distant rain. "This is it," I whispered, alone in the echo. Not a reward, not a finish line, but mine. With the clinic stable and our little team humming like a well-fed engine, I used my first real profits to put in an offer. The down payment nearly wiped me out, but I didn't flinch. I'd scrubbed cages, slept through lectures, and stitched up stray dogs in the middle of the night for this. A soft place to land. A week after the closing, I stood in the empty living room and cried. Not the cinematic kind, no swelling music, no graceful tears, just raw, grateful sobbing against the white walls. I painted them yellow 2 days later. Sunlight had earned its place. Inviting my family was complicated. I hesitated for weeks, wrote the message in drafts more times than I could count, but eventually I sent it. "Hey, just bought my first house. Would love to have you down for a visit if you're free next month. No pressure, just wanted to share this with you." They replied the next day. "Sure, we'll make it work." Not warm, but not hostile. I told myself that was progress. They arrived late. I watched their SUV pull into the gravel drive from the upstairs window. My stomach turned slow circles. My dad stepped out first, pressed shirt, familiar squint. My mom followed with a tote bag and the same tight-lipped expression she wore at every milestone of mine. I met them on the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Hey, come in, it's still a little sparse, but it's getting there." My mom looked up at the house. "It's bigger than I expected." My dad grunted. fancy floors. I smiled anyway. Oak, I refinished them myself. He didn't respond. Inside, I gave them the tour. Showed them the kitchen where I'd finally learned how to make soup from scratch. The guest room I'd painted sky blue. The office I'd set up with files, a rescue animal calendar, and a corkboard full of clippings and client thank you notes. They nodded, said little. My mom paused at the framed photo in the hallway, me in a clinic coat, a goat in my arms, a laugh frozen in time. I guess this is your life now, she murmured. I chose to take it as a compliment. Dinner was awkward. I'd cooked roasted chicken, cornbread, peach cobbler from Maribel's recipe. We sat at the small table in the dining nook. I lit candles. They didn't comment. So, I offered, clinic's doing well. Hired my first assistant, website's up. Ray says we might start merchandise soon, probably T-shirts with our logo. Clients keep asking. My mom cut her chicken. Do people really want shirts with a vet clinic on them? I hesitated. Apparently. My dad looked around the room, then muttered, still feels too fancy for a vet. I froze. The air shifted, not explosive, just sharp, like a paper cut quick and quiet, but somehow deeper than it should be. I saved for this, I said, keeping my voice even. Every cent came from the clinic. He took a bite, chewed, didn't meet my eyes. I'm not apologizing for the life I built, I added. You might not understand it, but it's mine. Silence. Then my mom reached for the salt and said, well, at least you're not asking us for help anymore. I didn't reply, didn't need to, because in that moment something inside me went still, not broken, just done searching. I realized I'd invited them here not just to show them the house, but to prove something, that I was worthy, that their rejection hadn't defined me. But maybe I didn't need their permission to exist anymore. Maybe I never had. Later that night, after they left for their hotel, I stood barefoot in the hallway. Looked at that photo again, me with the goat laughing. That girl didn't need applause. She just needed to be seen. And if her parents couldn't do that, well, someone else always had. I installed the security cameras as a precaution. The clinic had just gotten a new shipment of supplies, and the porch lights around the farmhouse had been flickering for weeks. Avery teased me about being paranoid, but I wasn't taking chances, not with everything I'd built. Besides, I told her, it's not like anyone's going to break in and steal lavender-scented flea shampoo. She laughed. We forgot about it. A week later, I flew to Charlotte for a 3-day veterinary symposium. Lectures, workshops, panels, more growth, more steps forward. I'd even been asked to co-lead a breakout session on trauma-informed care for rescue animals. I was nervous, but proud. The night before the presentation, I sat in my hotel room reviewing notes, a cup of herbal tea going cold beside me. My phone buzzed. Camera alert motion detected. Front porch 11:46 p.m. I clicked without thinking. The app loaded slowly. Then I saw them, my parents, on my porch. My father held something in one hand, a red plastic gas can. My mother stood just behind him, scanning the yard like a lookout. I froze. The feed flickered. My father stepped closer to the door, tilted the can. A slow stream of gasoline glistened under the porch light, dark and deliberate. My mother said something I couldn't hear. He nodded. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even move. I watched as they walked the perimeter, gas trailing like a ribbon, then turned back toward the front steps. That's when I remembered how to speak. I hit 911 on my phone with shaking fingers. This is Eliza Merritt. I am not home, but my security camera just caught my parents. Yes, my parents on my property. They're pouring gasoline. I think they're going to try to please send someone Asheville. Yes, that's the address. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Mine was. When I hung up, I collapsed. Right there in the hallway of the hotel, phone still buzzing in my hand, my knees gave out. A couple in business attire stepped off the elevator and found me sobbing on the carpet. One of them knelt beside me, asked if I was hurt. I could only shake my head. No wounds, not the visible kind. The fire never happened. Police arrived just in time. My parents claimed it was a gesture, that they were trying to make a point, that they never intended real harm. They were arrested on the spot, and I watched it all unfold from hundreds of miles away through screens and trembling breath. The next morning, I didn't show up for my presentation. I couldn't. My body felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Avery called crying. Maribel sent me a voice memo that ended in silence. Ray offered to fly down. I said no, I needed space. Or maybe I just didn't know what I needed yet. Back home, the damage was psychological, but no less real. The porch smelled faintly of fuel. The rose bush my neighbor had helped me plant looked scorched where my father's boots had trampled it. Inside, the farmhouse was untouched, safe, but I was. I walked through each room like a guest, heart hammering, checking windows, double-checking locks. This wasn't just betrayal. This was annihilation of trust. My parents hadn't merely rejected who I was. They had tried to erase it, scare it into silence. 2 days later, I stood in front of the house with the police report in one hand and my phone in the other. The detective had warned me they might try to contact me before court, that I wasn't obligated to speak with them. But I didn't need warnings anymore. I needed closure. The phone rang before I could decide. Unknown number, I answered. Eliza, my mother's voice, calmer now, practiced. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted to shake you up, make you see this isn't a real path. We thought if you got scared. I closed my eyes. The words felt like poison wrapped in apology. You wanted to burn my life down, I said, voice low. No, we thought you'd come home, reset. I almost laughed. This is home, and I will never reset for you again. Then I hung up. The final act. The end of any illusion I'd been holding on to. They were not going to change, and I was done shrinking so they wouldn't feel small. The courthouse smelled like dust and disinfectant, cold marble floors, peeling linoleum benches, the kind of quiet that settles on your chest like a weight. I sat near the front, a folder of statements on my lap and my hands pressed together so tightly my knuckles ached. Avery sat behind me. Ray to my right. They hadn't let me walk in alone. When the bailiff called the case, I stood. People versus Thomas and Judith Merritt. There they were. My parents entered through the side door, escorted, not freely walking. My mother wore her church jacket. My father's hands were cuffed in front. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, eyes evasive. Neither looked at me. The judge began. Legal words filled the room: arson, intent, trespass, endangerment. The lawyer they'd scraped together started a narrative. A misunderstanding, he said. Misguided concern. I said nothing, not yet. Then came the victim's statement. Mine. I stood, hands no longer shaking, looked straight at them. You didn't try to scare me, I said. You tried to erase me, my work, my home, my safety, because you couldn't stand that I built something without you. My mother flinched. My father looked at the floor. I begged for your respect, I continued, voice rising. I sent updates, shared achievements, invited you in, and every time you turned it into a punchline or a cold shoulder. I took a breath. Then, when all that didn't stop me, you tried fire. Silence. I reached into my folder, pulled out a single photo, held it up, me in front of the clinic, hands dusty from construction, a rescued dog licking my cheek. This is what you tried to destroy, not a fantasy, not rebellion, a life that helps others, that saves animals, that holds space for people you've never even tried to understand. I set the photo on the table in front of me, and then I said the words I had rehearsed 100 times. I'm not angry anymore, I'm finished. The judge nodded. My parents' lawyer muttered something about mental health, misjudgment, restorative dialogue. The judge interrupted. Do the defendants have a statement of apology? They didn't speak. The judge waited and waited, then ruled. Court would proceed. Charges were upheld. The trial would move forward. When the bailiff led them out, my father looked up at me just once. His eyes were glassy, not with regret but disbelief, as if he never thought I'd go through with it, as if his little girl would cave one more time, but I didn't. Outside the courthouse, the sun was sharp and hot. Avery wrapped her arm around my shoulder. Ray handed me a bottle of water like it was sacred. You good? He asked gently. I'm free, I said, because that was the truth. Not just legally, but soul deep. I had drawn a line. And no matter what came next, court dates, community whispers, family fallout, I would not step backward again. They hadn't just tried to hurt me. They'd shown me who they were. And now, finally, I believed them. The first snowfall came early. Just a whisper, soft flurries floating across the porch railings, dissolving before they could stick. But it was enough to make the farmhouse glow. Inside, the oven ticked gently. The air smelled like cinnamon and roasted vegetables, and laughter floated from every room. We called it Friendsgiving. No turkeys or formality. No folding chairs and tight-lipped silence. Just the people who stayed, who showed up, who chose each other again and again. Avery was in the kitchen dancing barefoot with Ray while trying not to spill cider. Maribel had brought her latest foster pup, an anxious beagle with a heart-shaped birthmark and trust issues. She named him Echo. He followed me everywhere now. Dr. Greer sent a bouquet with a card that read, You made me proud, not just for the vet work, but for surviving them. I hung it on the fridge. The fireplace crackled. Someone turned on a playlist with too many 80s ballads, and we all groaned dramatically before singing every word. At some point, I stepped outside with a cup of tea and Echo at my feet. The sky was gray, the mountains shadowed in the distance. I looked out across the land, the clinic still lit across the road, the fencing I'd mended myself, the oak tree that once held a mockingbird nest. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It just arrived one day and stayed. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Lydia appeared, holding two mismatched mugs. "You're always sneaking off at the best part," she said, handing me one. "I like the quiet parts," I replied. She nodded. "Same." We stood there a moment, side by side, watching the breeze nudge snowflakes from the roof. "You ever think about them?" she asked softly. I didn't have to ask who she meant. "Not much," I said. "Sometimes, but it's like remembering a storm. I don't live in it anymore, just check the sky now and then." She smiled. "That's good." I took a sip of tea. It was perfect, just enough honey, just enough lemon. "I don't need them to see me," I said suddenly. That was the trap, thinking I had to prove something. And now I just live. Inside, someone yelled, "Pie's ready," followed by a loud crash and Avery's voice cursing in French. We laughed. As we walked back in, Echo trailing close, I felt something settle in me, like my bones finally trusted the ground. The dining room was a mess, plates everywhere, candles burned down to wax puddles, someone's scarf tied around the dog like a cape. But it was mine, the family I chose, the life I built. And as I raised a glass for the toast, I didn't say something dramatic, just this: to every little thing they said wouldn't matter, and to everything we did anyway. The room roared with cheers, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt full.